Hello guys, so in this installment of the math tutorial, we will be discussing 3 general math topics including interest, annuity, and stocks and bonds. So for the first lesson, it will be about simple and compound interest. The flow of discussion will go as follows. So una guys, define muna natin yung concepts para mas makatulong siya sa solving natin later. So we'll be defining simple interest, compound interest, maturity value, and present value, and then we will be solving for all of them. Now, let us first define what simple interest and compound interest is by also looking at their differences. I think this is the best way guys para mas maintindihan nyo. Now for simple interest, it is where the principal is always the same, so the interest applied is the same. So, alam naman natin sa interest guys, we first deposit something or invest something or loan something, and then over time, nadadagdag yung interest sa ating initial amount. Now for simple interest guys, yung nangyayari is that same lang yung amount na nadadagdag for every application of interest. Kasi yung basis niya is always your initial amount. So say for example, na you have a loan of 1,000 pesos with 10% interest. So 10% of 1,000 is basically just 100, diba? So for every month following your deposit, your deposit will be added. Mas madadagdagan siya ng 100 per month. So it's always the same, 100, 100, 100. However, for compound interest naman, it is where the principal increases as interest is applied. So the interest also increases. So example guys is you deposit an initial amount. However, yung kapag na-apply na yung interest nyo sa first deposit nyo, what will happen is that sa next application of interest, yung output amount nyo na is yung magiging new principal. So over time, as interest is applied, your principal also increases. Thus, yung interest amount na nadadagdag sa original amount nyo increases. So for simple interest, interest applied is the same, but sa compound interest, the interest increases over time. Now let's talk about the maturity and present value. So maturity value is the future value of the money after all the interest is applied. Now you will see later na kinakalculate natin yung maturity value usually for simple interest lang. That is because for compound interest, yung formula for that, we immediately find the maturity value now without looking for the interest amount pa. But yeah, maturity value is, for example, you have an investment that you will be waiting for 5 years, no? So given an interest rate, what will be the value of that investment after all the interest is applied? So yung hinahanap natin dito guys is the future value ng investment mo or when it's matured. That is the maturity value. Now for present value naman, present value is the amount of money needed to be invested today to reach a desired amount in the future. It's pretty self-explanatory, no? For example, if I want 1 million pesos in 2 years, how much should I invest given an interest rate? So, mas ginagamit to siya sa compound interest because the formulas are the same and you will see later, no? But yeah, if I want 1 million pesos in 2 years, how much should I be investing today given an interest amount or interest rate rather? Now let's move on to the solving. Now for simple interest guys, as the name implies, it's very simple. We have this formula, I is equals to PRT, where I is equal to the interest amount, P is the principal, R is the interest rate, and T is time in years. So, what you basically do sa mga word problems is that you just take or list down yung ano yung time, ano yung interest rate, ano yung principal, and then you just plug in sa formula to find the answer. It's that simple. So we will have an example word problem in the next slide. So Jay started with a principal amount of 5,000 pesos. He invested his money for a 12% annual interest. How much will his principal gain 5 years later? So again, we just identify what is P, what is P, what is P, what is R, and what is T. So for the principal, we have 5,000 pesos. For the interest rate, we have 12% annual or 0.12. And then for the time in years, it's 5 years. So again, just plug in your numbers sa corresponding variables nila and solve with the formula. So we see here na 5,000 times 0.12 times 5 would equal to 3,000 pesos. So the principal amount that J will gain 5 years later with his 5,000 is 3,000 pesos. Now take note guys that 3,000 is not the future value pa of 5,000. It won't decrease ha. It's just yung 3,000 na to, ito yung idadagdag natin sa 5,000 5 years later. Now, para mas malinaw, no, we will now be solving for the maturity value. So, like simple interest, the formula is pretty simple din. Future value is equal to the principal plus the interest amount na kinalculate natin kanina. We have here the same problem. Jay started with a principal amount of 5,000 pesos. He invested his money for 12% annual interest. How much money will his investment have 5 years later? Now notice guys, that yung nagpalit sa, same pa rin yung problem natin, but pinalitan natin yung what is being asked sa word problem. So if kanina, how much will his principal gain 5 years later, this is asking for the interest amount. Now, it's asking for how much money will his investment have 5 years later. Basically, yung total na pera na. It's the principal and the interest amount. So again, we just find the given. Now, usually guys for I we still need to solve for that. But since we solved na kanina, then we just put it here. And then, we just put in the numbers sa ating formula. Principal plus interest amount, which will equal to 8,000 pesos. Now, we say na the matured amount of J's money is 8,000 pesos. Just to illustrate guys, further the difference between the simple interest amount I and maturity value F, just know na yung 3,000 is what you will add to the principal. While yung 8,000 dito is yung total amount talaga ng investment or loan mo. So yeah, this is just the interest amount and this is the total amount. Now, next guys is for compound interest. If kanina we discussed simple interest which had a simple formula, yung formula for compound interest is pretty long, relatively long, no? But it's manageable, I think. So again, we have pretty much the same variables, f for future value. Now, like I said, guys, we will be calculating na for the future value of compound interest at the start pa lang. Unlike sa simple interest, where we find the interest amount muna and then add it to the principal. But yeah, f is equal to future value, p is the principal, r is the interest rate, and t is the time in years. So we actually have a new variable dito, which is m, or the number of compounding periods in a year. So, madami naka-confuse dito guys, but I just want to explain a little bit. Na m can be, say for example, sa ating word problem, no? The word problem says compounded quarterly. So, how many quarters are there in a year? Basically, there are 4, diba? There are 4 quarters. So, in that case, your m will be 4. We can also say compounded biannually or semi-annually. Now, of course, by that we mean hinahati natin yung year into 2, which means that there are 2 compounding periods in a year, or M is equal to 2 for biannually. Again, quarterly, 4, biannually, 2, and other words din yan, guys. But you just need to analyze the problem for that. So we have here an example. Carl loaned 10,000 pesos from his friend. His lender gave him a 3% interest to be compounded 2 times a year for 3 years. What is the loan's maturity value? Now we're asking for the maturity value directly na. And then we will just write down the given. So we have a principal of 10,000 pesos. We have an interest rate of 3%, or in decimal, 0.3. We have a number of compounding periods, M, equal to 2. Kasi we state here na interest to be compounded 2 times a year, or biannually. And then the year is 3 years, as we see here. So here, we have the formula. Just plug in the values. So side note, guys, you should really be careful sa pag-input nyo ng values sa calculator. Although, it's very easy, no, to just substitute the variables with values. We cannot deny na sometimes nagkakamali talaga tayo sa pag-input ng digits. So, make sure na para hindi kayo magkamali, make sure na correct yung nalalagay niyo sa calculator nyo. But in calculating now for the future value, we will get 10,934 pesos and approximately 43 centavos. So the loan's maturity value is that 10,934 pesos and 43 centavos. That is for compound interest, where it is compounded 2 times a year. And like we said kanina, no, for compound interest, guys, na-apply yung interest, no, na-apply yung interest for each principal. So yeah, this is our result. Now, for present value, since kakatapos lang natin sa compound interest, we will obviously see the similarity between the formulas of compound interest and present value. Now, syempre, they're very similar, no? They're very similar. But for present value, yung only difference is that yung exponent M is negative. So, no, para maalala nyo lang, since we're looking for the present value, no, of course, yung ginagawa natin is essentially going back, no? Kasi if we want 1 million pesos in 5 years, then how much should we invest today? 5 years is the future, and today is the present. So that's backwards. No? That's backwards. Since we're looking for the present value, then we're going backwards essentially. So negative M exponent. Now same variables. So we had the same person, but for a different problem this time. Carl wants to have 100,000 pesos in 3 years. How much should he give the bank that offers 3% interest compounded per quarter? So the principal is 100,000 pesos. The interest rate is 3% or 0.03. The compounding periods is per quarter. So basically, a year has 4 quarters, so that's M is equals to 4. And then we have T equals 3 for 3 years. So yeah, it's just as simple as that, guys. Just determine the given sa variables natin, and then we just plug in sa formula. So yeah, carefully putting it in your calculator, we will have present value of 91,423.81549. So you should approximately invest 91,423 pesos and 82 centavos. At syempre guys, mas mababa siya kaysa sa 100,000 Kasi ito nga muna yung ilalagay natin sa bangko before natin makuha yung 100,000 in 3 years. So, that's it guys. I hope you understood our topic for today. So, if you need clarifications, you can just go back sa sections ng ating video just to check out the solutions and the definitions. So, see you in the next lesson. So, we're going to the next lesson, guys, which is about annuities. So, this will be the flow of our discussion. First, we will be defining what is annuity, what is simple annuity, what is general annuity, what are deferred annuities, and ano yung concept of future and present value for these kinds of annuities. And then we will solve for their future values, the present values, and in the special case of deferred annuity. So before we start guys, I just want to say na some of the concepts here or some of the concepts from the module will not be here sa ating video presentation. And that's because you will only focus on the concepts that can be solved mathematically in your module. So I suggest if you want to review completely, you also read your module to find out about the other kinds of annuities not mentioned here. Ayan. Just a disclaimer, no? Para hindi kayo malito sa day of exam or FEBA. So, firstly, what are annuities? So, an annuity is a series of payments made in regular intervals. An example to illustrate is monthly savings account. So, if you don't know how monthly savings accounts work, basically, magde-deposit kayo ng money sa inyong savings account and then in an interval, which is monthly here sa ating case, and then lalago yung money nyo based sa isang interest rate. So, again, for the regular intervals here, basically monthly, and then the series of payments naman is basically your monthly deposits. So, this is an example of an annuity. Now, we have two kinds of annuities that we will discuss. First is the simple annuity, and second is the general annuity. So, a simple annuity is where the compounding period per year is the same as the payment period. To illustrate, interest is applied monthly, payment is also monthly. So, basically, the same nakita natin dito na monthly naka-compound yung interest and then monthly din nagbabayad or nagsasubmit ka dapat ng payment. So, sabay na nangyayari yung compounding tsaka yung payment period. So, right after ma-compound yung interest, magbabayad ka agad. Now, for general annuity naman, it is where the compounding periods are different than the payment intervals. That is unlike simple annuity. So, an example is interest is applied monthly while you pay every 3 months or every quarter. So, basically guys, makita natin sa example natin na for every payment, you're basically paying for 3 months worth of monthly compounded interest since the periods are different. If every 3 months yung payment, monthly naman yung interest. So, I just want to clarify na the application of interest can also be lesser sa periods than payment. So, pwede ito maging interest is applied every 3 months while payment is monthly. Ayan. Just to be clear. Again, simple annuity, same ang payment period sa compounding period, and then general annuity, different sila. Now, for a special kind of annuity naman, which is deferred annuity. So, a deferred annuity is where the compounding period of interest starts, but the interest payment is delayed. So, may gap between the compounding of interest tsaka sa first payment. An example is, monthly compounding of interest starts in January, but the payments start in March. So we have another concept na super important sa deferred annuity. It is the period of deferral. So the period of deferral refers to the number of periods between the start of the interest and the first payment. So just to illustrate no, sa ating example, since we start at January sa interest application, but the payment start in March, we basically have 2 months, January and February, na hindi tayo nagbabayad. So that is called the period of deferral. Ayan. It is the number of periods between the start of the interest, January, and the first payment, March. So just to clarify, we say periods here, no? Naka-italicize, we say periods because not necessarily guys na monthly yung period of deferral. Not necessarily na one period is equal to 1 month. So, if sinabi sa word problem na quarterly, compounded quarterly, basically, 1 period is equal to 1 quarter or 3 months. If sinabi naman na sa problem na semi-annually or biannually, then the period of deferral, 1 period is equal to 6 months or half a year. Yan. Or hindi kayo magkamali kapag mayroong ganong types of problems. Now, for the concept naman of future and present value. So, future value is the sum of all payments made plus the compounded interest amount. So, again, sa annuities, we pay in regular intervals and then na-apply sa kanila ang interest. Future value is basically the sum kapag nagawa mo na every payment while na-apply na rin yung interest sa future. So, that's why tawag siyang future value. While present value naman is the amount of money that needs to be invested today for a desired amount in the future. So, as we can see, same lang ang definition niya sa ating interest lesson. However, I also want to point out na sa present value dito, iba yung nangyayari, okay? If sa interest, we're investing something and then lumalaki yung ating pera. Example, we invest 91,000 today and we get 100,000 in the future, in 5 years. But sa present value of annuities, what we usually calculate for is, example, magbabayad tayo ng 100,000 pesos now. And then, for the next 10 months, we will receive 10,000 pesos for the 10 months and then with the application of interest na. So instead of nag-i-invest tayo para makuha natin yung sum in one go, sa present value of annuities, we invest in one go and then makuha natin yung money back natin in intervals. So ayan. Now, we will be solving for the future value of simple and general annuity. And if you're asking where's deferred annuity, later pa yan siya sa present value. So, we have here the formula. Medyo complicated, no? But like I said, always be mindful lang sa nilalagay nyo sa inyong calculator para hindi kayo magkamali sa answers nyo. Be really careful. So, our variables are the future value FV, A or amount, the payments made every period, R or the interest rate, M or the number of payments in a year, monthly payment is equal to 12, quarterly payment is equal to 4, and etc. Time or T is just time in years, so the usual. Now we have an example word problem in the next slide. Let's read it. Jack plans to deposit 500 pesos biannually in a cash management account. The interest rate is 4% compounded biannually. Sorry, that's a typo. How much money will he have in 4 years? So notice, since this is simple annuity, na the same yung payment period of biannual or 2 times a year with the compounding period of biannual din 2 times a year. So, just a thing to note Later sa general annuity, magkaiba na sila. So, for this, again, let us just list down the given. We have the regular payments, 500 pesos. We have the interest rate of 4% or 0.04. We have the number of payments made in a year of 2. And then we have time in years, which is 4. Now just input those values in your formula and you will get 4,291.484525. Jack will have 4,291 pesos and 48 centavos in 4 years. So this is for simple annuity, biannual payment, and biannual interest application. Now, next naman is for general annuity. So for general annuity, we have an extra formula. We need to find I. And this is important, guys. I is very important sa general annuity. Since magkaiba yung payment intervals natin and interest application interval, we have M sub I and M sub P, and that is used to calculate for the interest rate per payment. So before we calculate for the future value of a general annuity, it's very important to find I muna. So we have the variables R is equal to rate of interest. M sub I is equal to the compounding periods, number of compounding periods in a year. And then M sub P is the number of payment periods in a year. So we use them muna here and then we will move on to the next equation formula rather. So FV is equal to future value, A is equal to the payment made every period, and T is time in years. So if we find I here, we basically use it sa ating formula dito, tsaka dito. And we also use the payment periods again dito sa exponent. Now we have another example here from Jack. Jack plans to deposit 1,000 pesos each month in his cash management account. The interest rate is 7% compounded yearly. How much money would he have after 7 years? So we see here na magkaiba yung payment period of every month sa compounding period of every year. So yeah, that is for general annuity. We now list down the variables. We need to look for I and for I first, then the future value. So the rate of interest is 7%. The number of compounding periods, which is yearly or annually, is 1. So 1 times a year or every year. And then the number of payment periods is 12 or 1 payment for every month. So that's 12 months, 12 payments. And then our amount is 1,000 pesos each month, 1,000. And our time in years is 7 years. So the first step is to find I. Let's solve for I with the interest rate and M sub I and M sub B. So you just put in your values and we will get an I of 0.0057. So this 0.0057 I, we will now be using that sa ating future value formula to finally find the final answer. So here, we just input the values. Oh, this is a typo. Rather, this is 1,000. Please ignore that. And basically, you just put in I here, 0.0057 and 0.0057. Now, I'm not sure if this is the correct answer kasi mali nga yung 500, but it's supposed to be 1,000. And Jack will have this amount of money with 1,000. Jack will have this amount of money in 7 years. So take note, now you need to find I first and then substitute it to your FV formula here. So instead of R over M, guys, you put 0.0057 instead for your I. And that is for general annuity, the future value of general annuity. Now, for present value naman. Again, present value is what you need to invest today for a desired amount of series of payments in the future. Okay? So, the present value, we will discussing about simple annuity, general annuity, and deferred annuity. So, this time, deferred annuity na tayo because we need to find the present values of deferred annuities. So, here is our formula. So, it's different, guys. It may not look like it's different, pero if you notice, we have 1 minus, etc., etc., and then negative m sa exponent. So this is for simple annuity again, where the number of payments per year is the same as the number of interest applications per year. So PV for present value this time, A for payments made every period, R for interest rate, M for number of payments in a year, and P is time in years. Let's move on to our word problem. Jack and Jill. Jill wants to get a pension plan offering 2% interest compounded biannually. If she wants to receive 20,000 semi-annually for the next 5 years, how much should she invest today? Again, simple annuity. Same ang biannual compounding sa biannual payments or nare-receive niyang payment from the banko. So, we will now list down the given. PV is what we're looking for. Oh, wait. So here, ignore the typo here, guys. This is supposed to be 7 and 7. So we just follow this in this screen. So R is equal to 7%. The interest is 7% and the time in years is 7. The amount or the payments are in 20,000 pesos and the number of payments made in a year is 2 or biannually. So let's just plug in those values. Again, please follow 7 years and 7% interest, not 5 years and 2% interest. We just plug in those sa ating formula, 20,000 times etc. etc. And we will get a present value of 218,410.40555 or Jill should invest 218,410 pesos 0.41 centavos today. So to clarify, guys, just to illustrate ano ang present value, Jill has to invest 218,000, this amount, to receive 20,000 per 6 months in the next 7 years. Okay? I hope you get what I'm saying sa present value. But, yeah. Now, for general annuity, just like sa future value of general annuities, we also need to find I. So, it's almost the same except nag-iba yung ating present value formula, hindi na siya future value. So, the same. R interest rate, M sub I, M sub P, the A or payments made every period, and then P is time in years. So the same process, we find I first, then substitute I to our present value formula. So Jill wants to get a pension plan offering 2% interest compounded monthly. If she wants to receive 15,000 pesos quarterly for the next 5 years, how much should she invest today? So, dito yung 2% interest and 5 years pala. My bad. Okay. So, we notice since this is general annuity, magkaiba yung compounding period of monthly sa payment period of quarterly. So, 4 times M sub P is 4 and M sub I is 12. So, we see here, the interest rate is 2% or 0.02. M sub I 12, M sub P is equal to 4 for quarterly, monthly. And then present value, we're looking for that. For the amount of regular payments, it's 15,000. And then the time in years is 5 years. Find I first, and we will get 0.005 approximately. And we will now substitute the values for our I to the present value formula. So for this one, Jill should invest 284,811 pesos and 29 centavos in order to get 15,000 per quarter. Okay? With the interest compounded monthly. Ayan. So that is for general annuity where the compounding period is different from the payment period. Now, for the last part of this lesson, we will be looking at how to calculate the present value of a deferred annuity. So this is a different approach, guys, from what you will see in your module. But we have here a formula that hinahanap niya na agad yung present value ng deferred annuity. Sa module kasi, we need to calculate two different but here they're just it's the same but sa isang formula na lang. And the same present value is equal to the payments made every period and R is the interest rate. However, we have K and N. So what is K and N? Diba instead of MT, we now have K and N. So K is the period of deferral. Again, the period of deferral is the time between the first application of interest and the first payment. So it's basically the gap between the interest time and the first payment. And then N naman is just empty or our previous place naka-place dito, empty. So we need to multiply the number of payments in a year and the time in years to get N. So just be careful with what you put in your calculator, huh? Now we have a word problem with Mary in it. So Mary settled an agreement that she will pay her new phone for 2 years, starting after the third month. Her monthly payment is at 2,000 pesos compounded 1% monthly. How much is the phone worth? So, makita natin guys na this is a deferred annuity because magsa-start na yung kanyang interest of 1% monthly but she will start paying pa sa third month ng kanyang agreement. So, our first step is to list down the given and find the N. So, PV, we're looking for that. The regular payment is 2,000 pesos. The interest rate is 1% or 0.01. Remove the percent sign in decimal. So M is equal to 12 because basically compounded monthly. So this is the number of how many times the interest is applied. And then T is 2 years. This is year 2 years. To find N, you multiply 12 times 2, which is 24. Now the next step is to find the period of deferral K. So in most cases guys, naka-state lang siya sa problem and you just need to analyze kung 3 month or kung 3 months ba siya or 2 months lang kasi sa start of the third month pa. So, or sa start ng third month pa. So here, since starting after the third month, then 3 months have passed which equals to a period of deferral equaling to 3. So 3 periods since 3 months and monthly yung compounding. So that's period of deferral. K is equal to 3. Now we just have a formula and we input our values dito sa ating formula. Make sure talaga guys na hindi kayo magkamali sa pag-input sa calculator. But here, we just put it and with this problem on deferred annuity, we get a present value of 47,385.02957 or Mary's new phone is worth 47,385 and 3 centavos. So deferred annuity where nauuna pa muna yung compounding before yung first payment. So meron gap sa kanila. So that's it for annuities. And if you need a recap, please just go back to our slides and I hope this helped you somehow. Thank you.
Hello there, and today we'll be talking about Lesson 8, Stocks and Bonds. What is stocks and bonds? A stock is a share in the ownership of the company. It is a security that represents the ownership of a fraction of a corporation. Basically, you're buying into the company by buying a fraction of their ownership. Companies can raise money either by borrowing or selling of shares of stock. Companies offer an ownership of their company to the public to finance operations, plan expansion, and others. Basically, you're selling a portion of your company in order to use that revenue to finance your own company. And in turn, if that goes well or not, it goes back to them. And more of that will be discussed later. Bonds represent a loan made by an investor to a borrower, a promise from the company to pay the face value to the bond owner within the given time period with the interest payment at a stated rate. And bonds are used by the companies, municipalities, states, and sovereign governments to finance projects, plan expansion, and others. Basically, if stocks were buying, this was lending because stocks are usually signifying a, a part of the company that has been bought. Bonds, however, it is loaning. It is about loaning, which is opposite. So let us look at the types of stocks. Number one, we have the preferred stock. It is a class of corporate stock in which the investor has preferential rights to the dividends and a company's assets. Two types of stocks under preferred stock. Number one, we have the non-participating stock, wherein shareholders received a fixed dividend only, while in participating stock, shareholders may receive actually an additional dividend if the company performs well. Basically, non-participating stock is like constant and stagnant. You're getting paid the same money every time. However, in participating stock, you may actually get a bonus if things go well in the company you're investing in. Now let's look at the common stock. Common stock is a class of corporate stock in which the investor has the right to vote and shares directly in the success or failure of the business. Basically, this puts you in more in deep with the company because you actually have the right to vote, and and the number of votes that you have corresponds to the numbers of shares you have usually in the company. So let's look about everything about stock valuation. Stock valuation is the process of intrinsic value of a share of a common stock. It involves number one, the current yield, and the current yield measures how much you have earned on a stock compared to other investments. Secondly, it is a way of determining the current value of a stock. And number three, it shows how much dividend you can get as percentage of current price of stock per share. And note, no dividend, it means no current yield. So we have here the formula which actually explains the meaning of the current yield. Because in the definition it says that the current yield is usually measured by the annual dividend per share divided by the current price per share. Therefore, it is always dependent on the current price of share. If the current price of per share is lower than the annual dividend per share, then of course the current yield will be higher. But if it was the reverse, then of course it will be lower. Secondly, we have the price to earnings ratio, one way of helping the investor to decide which stock to buy. And secondly, it relates a company's share price to its earnings per share. A high price to earnings ratio could mean that the company's stock is overvalued or investors are expecting high growth rates in the future. And as you can see, the formula here for price to earnings ratio is current price per share divided by the earnings per share. So pretty easy so far, right? Like we only have at best we only will solve this through division and common sense. So let's try. We have the third one, the cost, proceeds, and gain for loss of a stock. A, we have the proceeds. The proceeds refer to the amount of money that an investor receives after selling a stock less than the broker's commission. And secondly, and B, we have the gain or loss, depending. It is the difference between the cost of purchasing the stock and the received when selling the stock. It is a gain when the received is higher than the cost of purchasing, and it is a loss if the cost of purchasing is actually higher than the amount that you received. Pretty easy so far. So now let's look at sample problems. Number one, we have John's company's shares are priced at 430 pesos and 54 centavos each, pesos each. If he pays a dividend of 125 pesos per share every year, what is the current yield of that stock? Secondly, John's company is selling for 4,500 pesos per share. His company's had earnings of 150 pesos per share. Find the price to earnings ratio for his company. So let us look at our first problem. The given was the current price per share, which is 430 pesos and 54 centavos, and the annual dividend per share, which was 125 pesos per share. So now, going back, what we're finding here is the current yield. And going back to our first slide, we could see that the formula for current yield is just dividing the annual dividend per share over the current price per share. So basically, what we do here is we just substitute, like we could see 125, which is our annual dividend per share, divided by 430.54, which gives us 0.2903, or by multiplying it by 100 to see its equivalent in percentage, we could actually see that it's 29.03%. Therefore, the current yield rate per share is 29.03. I'll let you check that on your calculator, or you could try that on the problem on your own to make sure if you actually are able to keep up with me, or if you already got the gist of how to solve for the current yield. For problem number 2, however, this is about our price to earnings ratio. The current price per share is in that given for problem number 2 was 4,500 pesos, and the earnings per share is 150 pesos. Now we look at our solution. Our solution gives us, going back to the slide, it reveals that the price to earnings ratio, similar to the name itself, it's the current price per share over earnings per share. Do you see this? Price over earnings, just like price to earnings ratio. So our price to earnings ratio, just substituting the values of the current price per share over the earnings per share, which is 4,500 for the current price and 150 for our earnings. So we currently have 4,500 divided by 150, which is equal to 30. But since we're asking for a ratio here, so we always use the default 30:1. So this signifies that investors are willing to pay 30 times the earnings for one share of John's company stock. So John is a pretty lucky guy. So now let's proceed to our bond valuations. The name is bond, the valuation's bond. So bonds are interest-bearing securities which promises to pay a stated amount of money on the maturity date and regular interest payments called coupons. So what are coupons? It's not the coupons that you're used to that actually give you 50 pesos off or 99 pesos off on certain products. But in here in business math, we define coupons as periodic interest of payment that bondholders receives during the time between purchase date and maturity rate that is usually received semi-annually. So the bond or coupon rate is the rate per coupon payment period, which is denoted by the variable R. The price of bond is the price of the bond at the time of purchase, denoted by the variable capital T, a capital P. Par value of or face value is the amount payable on maturity date, denoted by the variable capital F. So things to note, if the P is equal to F, considering what we had earlier, the bond is purchased at par. If P is lesser than F, the bond is purchased at discount. And if P is greater than F, the bond is purchased at premium. So take note, okay? And now going on, term, or sometimes called tenor of a bond is the a fixed period of time in years at which the bond is redeemable as stated in the bond certificate, numbers of years from time of purchase to maturity date. So, fair price of a bond is the present value of all cash inflows to the bondholder. So, reviewing, term is actually the fixed period of time. So, therefore, it refers to how many years that the bond is redeemable. as stated in the bond certificate. So it could range from 1 year to a decade or even a century. It depends on the deal. And fair price of the bond is present in all cash inflows to the bondholder. So let's proceed to our sample problems. Number 1, find the amount of the semi-annual coupons for a bond with a face value of 25,400 pesos that pays 20% semi-annually for its coupons. Secondly, a bond has a face value of 350,000 pesos and its maturity date is 20 years from now. Its coupon rate is 3% payable semi-annually. Now we ask you, what is the bond's fair price assuming that the annual market rate is 1%? It may seem hard at first, but we'll just break the problems down one by one. So for our problem 1, the given the given was number 1, the face value was f or the coefficient f is equal to 25,400 pesos. And for our coupon rate, which is the variable r, we have the 20%. So for the solution, since we're actually finding the amount of coupons or like the amount of the semi-annual coupon, taking into notice that semi-annual means half a year. So we'll be using that later. So for the annual coupon amount, we just multiply f times r. And r, we convert it to decimal since 20% can be converted to zero point 0.2 or zero point 0.20 here, which means 25,400 pesos times the 20% or 0.20, which, check on your calculator, leads us to 5,080 pesos. And now, using this amount, since we have established what our annual coupon amount is. But what we're asking for or what we're finding in this problem is the semi-annual coupon, which means it's just good for half a year. So we can see here to solve for it, we need to multiply 5,080 with zero point 0.5 or 1 half since it's just half a year. So 5,080 times 1 half, which gives us 2,540. Therefore, we now can conclude that the amount of the semi-annual coupon is 2,540 pesos. Isn't it easy? Now, let's proceed to a much harder one. Not particularly harder, but it can take some time or can be really long. So for problem 2, our given for this problem is the face value variable f, which is 350,000 pesos. Our coupon rate, which is represented by r, is equal to 3%. Our time of maturity, which is stated in the problem to be 20 years. Our number of periods, which is 2 times 20, since 2, I placed it here 2 because it was asking for the semi-annual, which means there would be 2 payments in 1 year. So 2 times 20 years, which means there would be 40 periods. And our market rate is stuck at J is equal to 1%. So now for our solution. First, we need to find the fair price of the bond. So the amount of the semi-annual coupon is 350,000 multiplied by 0.03 divided by 2. Why is this so? Because 350,000 is our face value and we multiply it to R, which is our coupon rate, which is 0.03. However, we divide it by 2 since it is semi-annually, which means there will be 2 payments. So therefore, solving that down, and I suggest you can solve it with your calculator side by side me, it would result us to 5,250 pesos. Now, having said that, we consider that the bondholder receives 40 payments of 5,250 pesos each and 350,000 pesos at t is equal to 20. Time of maturity would be 20 years. So that's not it. There is actually even more. So now we solve for the present value. So our formula is present value is equal to the face value all over 1 plus the market rate, all in parentheses, to the power of n, which is our the time, which we have is 20. So therefore, substituting all that we've known in our given and our pre-solved values, we now get 350,000 divided by 1 plus 0.01, all in parentheses, to the power of 20. So now, solve with me with your calculator. You can actually get 286,885 pesos and 25 centavos. Now let's convert to the 1% to equivalent semi-annual rate, since we're solving for semi-annually here and the given market rate is for a year. So now we have 1 plus 0.01, all in parentheses to the power of 1, which is actually just negligible, is equal to 1 plus I squared all over 2 to the power of 2. So in here, we could notice that what do you call this, we could notice an equation in and it's squared. So we don't follow the binomial expansion theory, or like we don't expand it. Instead, we treat it as one variable. We treat it as if it was just x or y or something. So therefore, what we need to do is to transpose the squared and turn it into a square root, or to put things simpler, we put both sides into a square root. So therefore, we get 1 plus 0 1 1 plus 1 plus 0.01, we get 1.01. And since it's just to the power of 1, it's negligible, so we get 1.01. And the square root of 1.01 is something around, let's say, 1.004988. And since we have this 1 here on our right hand side, in which we transpose, since we want to isolate the I squared over 2, since that is what we're trying to solve here. My mistake in this PowerPoint, it should be I squared over 2. So therefore, we could notice that 1.004988 minus 1 results us to 0.004988. So that is our equivalent semi-annual rate. Thus, we could say that going back, this is our second formula for present value, which is r times 1 minus in parentheses 1 plus j to the power of negative n all over j. So j being again the market rate and all that. And we have r, which is the price of our semi-annual coupon. So therefore, we could say, we could look at here and substitute everything that we've been provided earlier, which is 5,250 for our R, times the quantity of 1 minus 1 plus 0.004988, which is our I squared over 2, which we've just solved earlier, which and to the power of negative 40. Negative 40 because we're now solving for the semi-annual rate. And since it's a semi-annual rate, we could say that the 20 we had earlier, we multiply it by 2, since there would be 2 payments happening per year and payable for 20 years, so therefore there will be 40. So substituting that, as you can see here, let me just get my pointer. We could see here, that's our negative 40, all divided by 0.004988, which is again our I squared over 2 value. And now we just simplify things and solve it slowly and surely. So we get 5,250, and simplifying everything here, which you can just do on your calculator, we could get to the value of 0.18047. Please solve with me. Otherwise, just inform the math club if there has been errors in this PowerPoint. But I hope not, because I've double checked it. Divided, and this value 0.18047 divided by 0.004988, which is our denominator from earlier. We just got the value of this part here, which is putting it, which is getting the 40 negative 40th, just raising this to negative 40, and then minus, and then subtracting 1 to it. So now we get 5,250 times 0.18047 divided by 0.004988. And now, further solving it, we divide this and we multiply it by 5,250. PEMDAS rules applies, and now we get 189,949 pesos and 38 centavos. Now, we just simply have to actually add this value and the value we had before, which is our present value. Earlier we had for 350,000 pesos, which is 286,885 pesos and 25 centavos. So we add these excuse me, 286,885 pesos and 25 centavos plus 189,949.38 pesos. And we add all this in simple math, just solve it on your calculator, we get 476,834.63 pesos. Therefore, we have to conclude a price of 476,834.63 pesos is equivalent to all future payments, assuming an annual market rate of 1%. So there you have it, as a very complicated problem at first, but if we actually solve it, we end up to have a very easy solution with a very practical answer. And look, his company has almost half a million pesos, which is, I deem, a very rich company, and John must be very lucky. So that's it. Thank you, and good luck in your evaluations and exams.